Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is Let's Rant with Scrapper using American Truck Simulator. We have 40,000 bucks right now, on our way to 125-ish or so, which will be enough to buy our first Western Star truck. It won't be as pretty as this one. This is the really expensive one that costs a couple $100,000 more than that. It was like 250 or something. But we'll start with a day cab that's about half as big as this and doesn't have a sleeper section in the back. And that'll be our first real truck. But until we get that one, we're going to have to go to the job market and take a random job. And I think we can go from anywhere. So let's just see what we've got. Let's see. We have a Colorado to Colorado job for 43 bucks. We've done Texas, Colorado. Let's see. We haven't done some of these towns in Colorado, so let's go ahead. It'll show us the state of Colorado, going from the south to the north. So if you look here on the map, the big dots are places we have visited already. You can see some of them over here. The little dots are ones we haven't. So this trip will allow us to discover 3 new towns and a new highway. So that's pretty cool. So we'll go ahead and take that job. What's going on here? The game's been struggling. It crashed. First time I tried to boot it up. Not sure what's going on. So we're taking logs, it looks like, from Alamosa to Steamboat Spring. Alamosa, I guess, to Steamboat Springs. Yeah, it's loading very slowly. I don't know what's going on. I haven't done anything new to my computer, so I'm not sure what the story is. So as we go here, well, let's start with this. We need to get out of here first. This is going to be really tight. So let's see if I can handle this without getting into a crash. Why is it not letting me? Here we go. Did I? Oh man, I tried to turn too wide. I'm gonna have to back up. Now you get to see me how bad of a driver I am. Stop. Okay, we don't want to hit that. But I want to still stay as wide as I can because I don't want to slam that into the wall. How we doing? Oh, wait, I almost turned the wrong way. I don't actually care if we damage the truck that much, but I don't want to damage the load if we can avoid it. Looks like maybe we're okay. Yeah, alright. Think we got it, at least up to that point. Okay, guys, so sorry about that. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze, and it looks like we got another tight squeeze coming up. And so this is the sort of thing where I do want to rant, but have to concentrate a little bit on this part to try to maneuver it out. You know, one thing I do think is that when they make it this tight, you ought to get some kind of bonus if you do it without smashing anything or crashing into anything. Because this is a much harder thing to do than some of the other loads where you just pull right out and go. So now where are we going here? We're heading to the right. So we have to make another wide turn. My gosh. And then I guess we're going to the left. And I just hit it. think we got it out okay. A little bit of scratches, probably, but it didn't say we got any damage to the trailer, so looks like we're okay. Wow. All right. So, let's get onto the road, and then I will start the rant, which is going to be about embracing failure in role-playing games. Okay, so that way's clear. Coming all right. Okay, so embracing failure in role-playing games, and this actually comes from the final episode of my Power Wash Simulator rant, which is chronologically the last rant I did before I started American Truck Simulator. In between, I put up a playlist of my cutting room floor, deleted scenes videos from my Brute in City of Heroes, but I'd actually made those recordings like a year earlier than Power Wash Simulator. So this is the last set of comments, and in that video, I was talking about what makes a good role-playing game player, and obviously the answer to that is somebody who is there to support the group and is being a steward of other people's fun and trying to make sure that while you're having fun, everybody else is having fun too. And if everybody does that, you're all going to have a good time. In the comments, RB, who is one of my best commenters in terms of just putting really interesting thoughts onto the channel for me to then talk about some more, and I got into a short discussion, just one comment and a reply, about computer role-playing games versus tabletop role-playing games, and how there's a huge difference in terms of the mentality that you have when you're playing these games. And I noticed this very recently because I've been playing the computer role-playing game Starfield, which is a Bethesda game, similar in style to Fallout 3, I guess. It reminds me of that. I haven't played Fallout 4, so I don't know about how similar it is to that, but it probably is. And this is really important because in the old days, when I was learning to play tabletop role-playing games, D&D and Champions, there weren't any computerized versions of these things. Eventually, the Ultimate games came out, and we played them, and eventually some of these other kinds of games, and you had text games like Zork and the Infocom games and so on. So eventually... What happened? Oh, headlight offense. Why is it at 6:45 p.m.? It's perfectly bright out. Why do I have to have my headlights on? That's really annoying. There's not a hard rule in any state on a specific time. It's always within 30 minutes of sunset, right? So it changes. Why is it always yell at me right around 7 o'clock p.m.? Even though there's at least an hour of light left. That's super annoying, and I should be in the right-hand lane here because I'm going so slowly. Oh, and also the right-hand lane is the only one there's going to be. Alright, so yeah, there's nothing I could do about this. They didn't give me a strong enough truck to go quickly with this heavy load. So when I started playing, nobody playing D&D had played role-playing games that were anything like D&D because they couldn't make them yet in computers. They just couldn't do it. So computer role-playing games were simple, things like Rogue, and people played them to try and get a D&D-like experience when we couldn't get together to play D&D. But the primary experience that we all had was Dungeons & Dragons, and we played that for a lot more hours than we played games like Ultima or Rogue. Now, in modern times, people have been playing computer role-playing games for decades. They've been playing games like Neverwinter Nights, Star Wars Galaxies, City of Heroes. You've seen me do that. And MMOs, I guess, are a little bit different. But for solo computer role-playing games that you play on your desktop or on your iPad nowadays, things like that. You have save points. And so whenever you're about to do something dangerous, and I just did this today in Starfield, in that game you can board a landed spacecraft, kill the crew, and commandeer the craft. And I already did that once with a pirate ship. So as pirates that were attacking a government installation, I wiped them out and I took their ship. And that's okay because they were pirates. But then I was out in an open field and I saw some just random hunters come by, and they got killed by the predators they were hunting. There were 2 of them. I went to help them, and I couldn't get there in time. So they were dead. I killed the predators, and then I got on board the ship. And I could have commandeered the ship and taken it over. But when I went to go on the ship, I didn't know if the ship was going to have anybody on it or not, and I didn't want to kill people who were innocent, right? Oh man, this is going to be really tight. Let's see if we can let this guy go by first. Please come by. Please pass. I want to let these guys go because it's going to be really hard to turn, and I'm going to probably have to turn into the oncoming lane to get around this. Although it doesn't. I guess if we go over the dirt, it's not going to be so bad. So anyway, yeah, I was I saved it. He just hit me. I saved it before I went on board the ship because I didn't know what was going to happen. Okay. Oh man, almost hit that too. And just in case things turned violent and I had to shoot somebody I didn't want to shoot, I could reload, and that never happened, right? And also this morning when I was playing, I came to a sinkhole that led to a cave, and I went in it, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to get back out because you had to like jump down into it. And so I saved before I went in there. Now, it turns out I was able to get out of it. I was able to teleport back to my ship, like quick travel. But if I hadn't been able to do that, I would have reloaded and said, okay, not going down into the sinkhole. I apparently don't have the equipment I need yet, so I just won't. I'll just reload, right? And so Arby's point about this is that in computer role-playing games, players generally don't have to accept failure. If they fail at something, they can reload from an earlier save. And you learn to save early and save often, right? Anytime there is a potential for failure, you save first and then have the conversation with the NPC. Now, I do that a lot because sometimes these games are badly programmed, and when you have the conversation with the NPC, it's not clear whether what you're doing is going to be what you would want the character to do or not. And sometimes I've had the character do stuff I'm like, no, that's not what I was trying to do. That conversation option was badly written. I wasn't going to try to attack this guy or insult this guy. I wouldn't have picked that option if I'd known that that's what was going to have my character say, right? And so it's insurance against misunderstanding, right? But also, if this thing is tougher than you realize, you can just reload. Now, the fact that you can just reload actually causes these games to be graded by the developers as much harder than if you can't reload. Okay? Because since you can reload, they can kill you. Your character doesn't actually die. You just reload to right before you were dead and try again. And there are games that are designed, I tend not to like games like this, but there are games that are designed to expect you to fail over and over and over again until you figure out how to succeed at this encounter, right? And so the encounters are graded very hard because they know you can reload from an earlier save and just start over. Okay? And so players get used to this. And because they're used to reloading from an earlier save, they're used to being able to take all kinds of risks with no permanent consequence to the character. Because if the risk doesn't pay off, you can just reload. Okay? And now you get into a tabletop role-playing game. And you're in a risky situation, and if you mess up, your characters might be clapped in irons and brought to the gallows. And there's no escape from that, not realistically. In a CRPG, you would just reload to earlier than what that happened and make sure you don't get clapped in irons again this time. But in a tabletop role-playing game, there's no option to do that generally. And so you're stuck with the bad outcome. You are stuck with failure. And a lot of modern players who are used to computer role-playing games don't know how to deal with that, because in all of their role-playing game experience, which is mostly computer role-playing games, they've never had to live with a negative consequence. They've just reloaded and start over without the negative consequence and make sure they don't get it this time. Right? You might attack the enemy base 17 times, dying 16 times, but the 17th time you got through without a scratch because you just got lucky and they didn't hit you, and after doing it 16 times you figured it out. And so your character in the final save game file is unscathed. Right? Whereas in a tabletop role-playing game, either your character died or you're badly wounded, and now you have to play the rest of the mission wounded. And that's going to lead to problems. You don't have as many hit points, you're at negatives, whatever, right? You now have to live with the consequences. So what RB said, and I agree, is that traditionally in role-playing games, players had to learn to embrace failure. And to learn that failing just gave you something different to roleplay about. And in many cases, failing leads to more interesting roleplay than succeeding does. Right? You're roleplaying your character reacting to a bad situation, but it's still roleplay. And if you roleplay well, the joy of the roleplay should be just as good. Right? It's all about whether you like playing a role or not, and if you like playing that role, you should be willing to play the role for good or bad. And I know we've talked about this before, because I remember saying that if you look at actors, right, on TV shows and stuff, or in movies, actors often love playing the character who's in a bad situation, the character who's dying of cancer, and you'll see people get Academy Awards for playing a character who suffers and doing the suffering well, right? Actors often love being cast as the villain, right? And they relish. And there are some actors who specialize and often play villains. And they know they're going to lose at the end of the movie, but they also know that if they play a really good villain, they are often liked better than the hero. And that's because people appreciate the role, and the actor gets into the role of the villain and does a really, really good job. It's hard to play the antagonist, and I think I may have quoted this before, but I remember when I was a kid, my mom and grandmother used to like to watch the TV show Little House on the Prairie, so, 8 o'clock Sunday night, that's what we watched. I'm pretty sure that was what time it was on. And it might have been Thursday, but 8 o'clock would come, Little House on the Prairie, I can still sing the theme. And on that show, the main character is the main characters are the Ingalls family. It's Laura Ingalls, who is based on the character of the person in real life who wrote the Little House books, Laura Ingalls Wilder. There's also her sister Mary, and she's got another little sister, and the mother and the father. And then in the town, there is a family called the Olsons, and Mr. Olson owns the general store, and he's actually a nice guy. but Mrs. Olsen is horrible, and her daughter, Nellie Olsen, was just a little evil, mean, nasty teenage girl. She was horrible, and especially she was horrible to Laura. They were snobs. They were mean. She would play nasty tricks on the Ingalls kids and get them into trouble. And I mean, she was just horrible, right? And I despised Nellie Olsen. And I despised her so much that I disliked the actress who played her. I thought that the actress must be a terrible jerk. And when my mom was talking about having read a TV Guide article about the actress, and I don't remember her name, and what a sweet kid she was, I said, I don't believe that. And my mom said, what do you mean? I said, well, she's so nasty on the show. I hate her. I don't believe that. And I was a kid, right? And my mom looked at me and she said, well, the girl that plays Nellie Olsen would probably be highly flattered that you think that she's such a good actress that not only do you dislike the character, but you dislike her, right? That means she's very convincing as an actress. I didn't understand this as a kid, right? But as an actress, that was an excellent role for her, and I don't know if she ever acted in anything else, but you can easily picture a director of a movie or something watching that show going, I gotta have this person in my movie because she plays such a good villain, right? And so, yeah, I mean, role-playing isn't acting, but if you think about how actors behave, right, they actually like it, oh boy, when unpleasant things happen, or when they're when they are asked to portray a negative character or a negative role or a negative experience, because this lets them stretch as an actor, and they're not taking it personally. They don't think it's happening to themselves, right? They're enjoying the role play that comes from the difficult challenge and the challenge of portraying that part, right? So it's not a bad thing for you when a bad thing happens to your character. It's just an opportunity to roleplay. But because so many players have cut their teeth on role-playing games, on computer games, where they save and reload whenever anything bad happens to their characters, you don't get the practice that I had as a kid of something bad happening to your character, and you just roll with it. It's just something to role play about, right? Because you're not used to it. You're used to, oh, well, that's a negative thing for my character. Let's just save and reload, right? And again, one of the reasons why computer role-playing games do that is because often the bad thing that happens to your character in a computer role-playing game, a solo computer role-playing game, is you and your party just wiped. Everybody died. Would you like to quit the game or reload from an earlier save? And those are your options. And so, come on. And so, I guess that's what I wanted to talk about today, really, that as a role player, you need to embrace failure. And oftentimes, the failure leads to more interesting role play than the success. By the way, that's one of the primary bases for the design of the game Ironsworn, right? And I guess a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse games are like this, but I've only ever played Ironsworn and its sister game Starforged. When you make a check to see whether your character succeeds at doing something like facing danger, there are sort of three possible outcomes: a strong hit, a weak hit, and a miss. A strong hit is basically an extreme success. A good thing happens, and it's as good as it could be plus. It's awesome. A miss is a bad thing happens. You failed at it, and you failed so badly that there's going to be a pretty severe negative consequence. And then a weak hit is you succeed, but you take some negative consequences, right? You succeed, but there's a negative to it, right? We're succeeding at driving this trailer, but it's really, really slow. It's a weak hit, right? You take some bad with the good. The the way this is described is yes and for a strong hit. Yes, you succeed, and on top of that, you get something cool happening. Weak hit, a miss would be no, and you also get this bad thing. And a weak hit is yes, but. Yes, you succeed, but. Yes, you persuaded the king to let you go, but the jester is now your enemy, and he's actually the head of the Assassin's Guild, and he's sent somebody to kill you, right? And so the overwhelming majority and the probability charts for Ironsworn, under most conditions, is you're going to get a weak hit. You're going to get a partial success with some negative. Why is it in Ironsworn that that's the highest probability? Because Sean Tompkin, the author of Ironsworn, knows that in order to propel the roleplay forward, you don't want just success, success, success. You want a success with a but, because the but leads to the roleplay. Right? But players tend to only like out-and-out successes, and they want to reload from an earlier save until they get the best possible outright success. And they definitely don't like failures. And in Ironsworn, it's often, under a lot of circumstances, you're much more likely to get a weak hit than either a miss or a strong hit, and you're more likely to get a miss than you are to get a strong hit. Right? The strong hits are just about the rarest thing you're going to get. And it's not because Sean wants you to lose. It's because Sean Tompkin, the writer of Ironsworn, knows that this is what will help you build a narrative and have a cool story happen to your character, right? Think about the movie Star Wars, right? The original. Almost everything they do is a weak hit, right? Every time they succeed, they get a complication, right? We hid from the stormtroopers on the Death Star, but there's a tractor beam in place and we've got to take it out, right? We successfully get into the security room and avoid beat up the stormtroopers and stuff and avoid detection, but we find out that Princess Leia is about to be executed and we have to go save her. We rescue Princess Leia from the prison, but Han Solo had a conversation with the security guard up in the security area, and they're sending troops. Right? We got away from the attack of the stormtroopers by going down into the trash compactor, but the walls are closing in. Right? We got out of the walls from closing in from this trash compactor, but now we're being chased by stormtroopers. Right? We got back to the Millennium Falcon and the tractor beam was turned off, but Obi-Wan Kenobi just got killed. We get away from the Death Star, taking out 3 or 4 TIE fighters in the process, and make it to the planet Yavin's 4th moon where the Rebel base is. But the Empire is tracking our ship, and the Death Star is 30 minutes away. Right? You see how each and every one of the successes in Star Wars, jeez, look at this. Each and every one of the successes in Star Wars is coupled with a complication that makes it not a full success, but just leads you into the next failure, and the next, and the next, and the next, right? And that propels the story forward. That's what makes Star Wars exciting and fun to watch. It's always out of the frying pan into the fire. Players don't like getting dumped into the fire, and they want to reload. Okay, wait a minute. Let's reload back on the Death Star, and I'm going to search the Millennium Falcon for tracking devices before we launch. This way, they can't track us to the 4th moon of Yavin. But if they don't track you to the 4th moon of Yavin, you don't have the last battle against in the trenches, right, where Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star. The coolest part of that whole movie, right? So that's what RB and I are talking about by embracing failure, right? Embrace the negatives, because the negatives lead to interesting storytelling and interesting narratives. And by the way, this dovetails with the first regular episode of this playlist in American Truck Simulator where I was talking about how people were saying that you should change the die rolls if it quote-unquote improves the story. What does that mostly mean? I suspect it mostly means change the die rolls so that everybody succeeds, right? That it quote-unquote makes a better story. No, it doesn't. Sometimes it makes a better story when you fail, or when you only partially succeed, which is probably the most interesting part of a story, because the partial successes allow you to have some satisfaction, but lead you to the next complication that drives the story forward. Oh shoot, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to lower my high beams because this guy was coming at me. So, my advice to all people who are interested in becoming better role players, and in terms of role-playing game players, my advice to you is learn to embrace failure. Welcome it. Accept it. Understand that failure is what leads you to more interesting story. And if you want a really cool, interesting story, then embrace the failure. By the way, you can learn this lesson from the actual play. The various shows on YouTube and Twitch and everything where people are playing these games, and you've got like experienced actors and people like that who are playing Critical Role, Wildcards ETU, Wildcards Deadlands, and so forth. On these shows, the players readily welcome bad rolls. They laugh about it, and then they gleefully roleplay the failure, and they have a lot of fun doing it, right? And so if you think, oh, it would be really cool to play a game like that, well, one of the things you have to do is embrace failure if you're going to play a game like that, because those guys roll in the open. The GM often rolls in the open. They do on the Saving Throw show. The GM rolls in the open. And sometimes the players fail. And there are lots of times on these shows where, like, in Wildcards, you can, it's Savage Worlds, you can use a Benny to re-roll. Sometimes they have a Benny and they say, you know what, I'm not going to re-roll. I'm going to take the failure here because I think that that's what would happen to my character. And I think that it will be more interesting to take the failure. My own players did this as well, by the way, when we first started playing Savage Worlds. The very first time they encountered horror creatures, they weren't zombies, they were ghouls. And I said, everybody make a fear roll, right? You make a spirit roll against fear. And my best friend and one of the other players, the woman in Finland, they both failed the fear check. And the woman in Finland said, you know what? I said, would you guys like to use a Benny to re-roll? And she said, you know what? No. I want to see what happens when you fail a fear check. It's a new game. I've never played this game before. Let's see what happens. And my best friend was like, yeah, let's see what happens. So they made their rolls. Wow, look at this. There's a rock slide here. They made their rolls, and one of them was panicked and had to run away. And the other one was got an adrenaline surge and got like really amped up to fight the enemy, And so they were like, hey, that's cool. That's interesting. And, wow, this is a really rough route with this trailer and this really weak truck. So they embraced the failure. They said, okay, this is cool. We want to see what this is. And then they gleefully roleplayed their characters being scared or having an adrenaline surge or whatever. So it can be really fun to play out the consequences of bad things happening to your character, as long as you're not taking it personally, and as long as you don't feel like you always have to succeed, because that's what computer role-playing games taught you happens in a role-playing game, is the main character has plot armor and always succeeds. Because effectively that's what happens, right? In a computer role-playing game like Starfield, yeah, my characters died 3 or 4 times in terms of temporarily, right? But I always reload. So in terms of the story that actually existed in the current save file, the characters never died because those deaths were not in the current save file. I didn't save those, I reloaded those, right? And so as a result, this character basically has plot armor, She never dies. And yeah, plot armor isn't interesting. There's a reason why it's a term that's used in the derogatory. Oh, this character has plot armor, right? It means that the story is bending itself into a pretzel to avoid anything bad happening to this character, and that's unrealistic and it's boring. And it means that there's no reason to read the story because you know that the character's never going to die, never going to have anything bad happen to them because they have plot armor. So instead, guys, what you want to do is have a fun and interesting story. And in order to do that, you have to embrace failure, embrace the negative consequences. That doesn't necessarily mean your character's going to die all the time, but it's okay not to succeed. And by the way, it's okay to run from a fight. And that fight against the ghouls, after two people failed their fear checks, and the guy who got the adrenaline surge ran up, and his very first attack that hit him did 3 wounds, which is the most you can have in Savage Worlds, and left him nearly incapacitated. Okay. And then one of the other characters took 1 wound. They were ready to retreat. They were leaving. They were backing out. And my best friend said, "All right, wait a minute." He said, "I want to try shooting them before I back up." Right? And I said, "Okay, go ahead." And he took a shot, and since they're extras, he did a wound, and it took the ghoul out completely. And he said, "Guys, let's not run from this." Right? They had no calibration for this. They didn't really know the difference between extras and wild cards. They didn't know how much damage these things could take. They'd missed them a couple of times, but they hadn't hit, I don't think. And they didn't realize that the damage they could do was enough in a single shot to one-shot them. And when my best friend saw that, he's like, "Okay, let's not run from this thing. Maybe we jumped the gun here." And so then they stayed, and they killed the ghouls, right? And the point that I'm making here is that, yeah, they could still run from the ghouls. It's not the end of the world, and they were perfectly willing to do that because it's okay to fail. They would have then role-played characters who ran from the ghouls. And there would have been different roleplay than there was with them killing the ghouls. But it wouldn't have been a bad thing necessarily, right? They still could have gone to the town marshal, told them about the ghouls. Maybe the town marshal would have come and with the posse and killed the ghouls. You know, who knows? He was corrupt, so I don't know what he would have done. But that didn't happen because they stayed and fought. But the point is that if they hadn't stayed and fought, if they had run away, it's not the end of the world. It's just something else to roleplay about. So, again, my advice, and I think RB's advice, although I don't like speaking for other people, but I'm pretty sure RB would say the same, is embrace failure as a player. Learn that it's okay for your character not to succeed at every skill check, not to succeed at every attack, not to succeed in every combat, not to succeed at everything you do. It's okay to fail. It's okay to fall. It's even okay if the character dies. It's just an opportunity to make up a new character, right? And I think I'll end with that story. Matt Colville, in one of his campaign diaries, talked about how he had killed off the one guy, Phil, his character, and Matt felt bad about it. He felt like maybe I overdid it and shouldn't have killed him off. It wasn't done with die rolls. It was done as a dramatic scene in a prison. And after his character died, Phil got up and walked away from the table. They were at work. They were in their company, Turtle Rock Studios. And after Phil's character died and Phil got up and walked out and said, I need to take a walk, the other players started cleaning up. And Matt said, "What are you guys doing?" And they said, "Well, that's it. That's the end of the game." He said, "No, it's not. Well, we don't want to play anymore. This character died." Right? They thought that that's the end of D&D. Once a character dies, that's the end of the story. And he said, "No, it's, so Phil, meanwhile, was walking around the hallway, and the other employees knew that it was D&D night. Hey, Phil, how's it going? I don't want to talk about it. Huh, that's weird. Phil usually enjoys D&D. So after about 20 minutes, Phil comes into the room, and he sees they're all cleaned up. And Matt's begging with them to stay and trying to talk them into it. And Phil says, what are you guys doing? And they said, well, that's it. D&D's over. And he said, what are you talking about? He said, your character died. Doesn't that mean the game is over? And he said, no, it's not. He said, I'll make up a new character. Don't worry about it, right? It's fine. And so these new players just thought it's like a video game, right? When the character dies, you can't reload the save, so that's the end of the game. We have to just stop. And Phil was like, no, I'll just make up a new character. He said, look, I'm annoyed. My character died. I'm always annoyed my character dies, but I'll make up a new character and it'll be cool, and I'll enjoy the new character as much as I enjoy the old one, maybe better. It's fun to make up new D&D characters, right? And Matt Colville then said, a friend of his once told him, Matt, whenever you kill off one of my characters, I'm going to be mad. Just let me be mad, right? I'm going to be mad for 15 or 20 minutes, and then I will remember that this gives me the opportunity to make up a cool new character, and I love making up D&D characters, and I'll get excited about a new character concept, and I'll be fine. But you've got to let me go through being mad for 15 or 20 minutes before I come out the other side of it and realize, hey, this is fine, right? But that kind of attitude comes from people who are used to embracing failure, right? Phil was a little mad for a little while, but then he embraced the failure and said, oh, well, this is cool. I get to make up a new character anyway, and I like doing that, right? And so yes, this is my advice, and I think RB's advice probably as well. Embrace the failure. Look at it as an opportunity. If it's a character death, it's an opportunity to make up a new character that's better than the one you just got killed, right? All the stuff you did with that character that you've had second thoughts about, maybe I would have rather done this or that or the other, put that learning into your new character and make up an even better, more awesome character that you like playing even more than the character who died, right? And if it's not character death, if it's just failing a skill check or, losing a little face with the general's, the daughter who, the guy's daughter who runs a general store or what have you, I'm only mentioning that because I'm reading a book by Larry McMurtry on the, it's like the prequel to Lonesome Dove called Dead Man's Walk. And one of the characters is in love with the daughter of the guy who runs the general store. So maybe you're going to lose reputation with her. Maybe she's going to break up with you. Or she's not going to fall in love with you. That's okay. There are other female NPCs you can romance, right? And even if there aren't, you can get a lot of mileage about out of role-playing the angst of your character who's lost his lady love, or his chance at his lady love, right? You can get a lot of mileage out of that too. It's just a role-playing opportunity, guys. There's no better or worse thing objectively to role-play about. There's just different role-play opportunities that allow you to come up with different dialogue and descriptions and role-play different moods for your character. You don't always want to play a mood of, hey, everything's awesome and I'm happy. That's not a challenge. You want to sometimes role-play being sad, and sometimes role-play being angry, and sometimes role-play being frightened. That's how you grow as a role-player, and how you challenge yourself as a role-player. And that's how you become better at role-playing. And it's also how you build a really cool story. So embrace the negatives, embrace the failures, embrace the character deaths. They're not bad things happening to you. There might be bad things happening to the character, but the character is just a pawn. It's a pawn for you to use. It's a game piece for you to use to provide you with role-playing opportunities. To the character, this might be a disaster, but to you, it's just something cool to role-play about. Don't internalize what happens to the characters as if it's happening to you. And by the way, one really good way to make sure that you're not internalizing it is don't make up a character who's basically you. Too many people do that. I'm just playing myself in space. I'm just playing myself in the Forgotten Realms. Well, if you do that, Then it really feels like something bad is happening to you when something bad happens to your character. And then you're role-playing yourself having something bad happen to him or her. Don't do that. Instead, play a paladin tiefling who's nothing like you. And then when something bad happens to that character, no big deal. It's just something to roleplay about. So that's my advice, and probably RB's. Embrace the failure. Embrace the negative. Roleplay about those negative consequences, and enjoy the challenge of portraying the character accurately in that situation, rather than always having to win, win, win. So I think we'll stop there with the advice. We're almost done with this trip, so I'll go ahead and finish the delivery. This is going to jack up our fortunes quite a bit. This has been quite the challenging trip between trying to do all those zigzags in the dark and having a truck that was almost not quite up to the task. Where are we turning off here? It's onto a dirt road. Wow, this is going to be another challenge. Yeah, this is actually quite the challenging trip for a quick job. And yeah, they didn't quite give me a powerful enough truck to do this. It felt like this truck was just a little underpowered. We were definitely struggling to get up to 20 miles an hour a few times. I'm trying to remember to make wide turns here because this is such a long trailer. Now we're going this way. Okay. But yeah, this is one of the more challenging trips I've done in a long while. And boy, those switchback roads with this long trailer and this truck. Look at this thing. It's 8 miles an hour is all it can do pulling this thing up here. We definitely should have had a more powerful truck for this job. Now, if you're running your own truck, you can make it as powerful as you want by putting a better engine in it and that sort of thing. And we're definitely going to have much more powerful trucks eventually, but we won't be able to do it right away. And the one thing you got to watch out for here is you don't want to hit this thing against the rocks, because if you damage the trailer, you will lose money on the reward. They'll charge you, they'll like penalize you for the damage to the trailer. Man, 13 miles an hour is all this thing can manage on this road. Now, I don't have it turned on, but when you're on a dirt road like this, if you have the force feedback turned on, man, the Xbox controller is just shaking really hard. But I don't leave it on. The main reason is that I found it was really draining my battery. So the batteries, and I kept having to change batteries in the Xbox controller. So I don't leave force feedback on in any games anymore, just because I don't feel like having to change the batteries every few days. And we are almost here. Man, that is a really long final mile. It's almost like they changed the scale almost to 1-to-1, you know. And you can hear my character yawning. We need to get some sleep. I don't know if it's going to restore how much sleep I need on the next quick job or what. But we'll find that out in the next episode. We're just going to finish this job here and look at the results, and then we will stop for the evening. And I think I'm going to just take the quick delivery here. I have no desire to run this trailer any further. Okay. So we got about 20,000 bucks, and that's a 50% increase. And we leveled up, guys. That is good. We've become an enthusiast. And I think we're going to keep going long distance so that I can get longer and longer distances. We now can go up to 1,600 miles, which is most of the way across most of the states, but not all the way. For now, we can purchase our own trailers. Yeah, but we don't even have our own truck yet. So we'll do that in another episode. Until then, guys, I hope you enjoyed this rant, and I did. So I hope you did. And I am Scrapperlock. Until next time, I will see you then.